Hi, everybody. My name is Marcelle Epley, President and CEO of the Long Beach Community Foundation, and I'm joined today with me, Gary DeLong, our board chairman, founder, philanthropist, fund holder, and great supporter of our foundation. And we're happy to be here and have you join us for the 25th webinar, 25th anniversary webinar kickoff for the Long Beach Community Foundation. And if you're logged in, please go in the chat. Let us know how we know you. Are you a fund holder? Are you a grantee, a nonprofit? We'd love to hear from you. Introduce yourself and say hello.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction, Marcelle. I'm happy to be here. And our four panelists today, nobody knows more about the Long Beach Community Foundation than these individuals. I'm pleased to introduce Jim Worsham, our founder and founding CEO, and really the idea man behind the whole concept of establishing a community foundation in Long Beach. And not surprisingly, he was also the first donor to the foundation. And on his way out, he established the Community Foundation's operating endowment just before he retired after 18 years with the foundation. And then up, we have Jean Bixby Smith. Jean was the founder and the chair emeritus. And really, it was her connections in the Long Beach community that provided the very first conversations to well-known leaders and philanthropists and convinced them of the benefit of having a community foundation right here in Long Beach. She opened many doors. She spearheaded the Vision Fund, which is a fund that continues to support the Community Foundation's operations today, as well in its very early days. It's what kept the doors open. And also with us is Jane Netherton. Jane is also a founder. She's my predecessor as board chair. She followed Jean Bixby Smith into that role. She led the efforts of championing outreach to nonprofits, specifically with all of our agency funds, community activities with our National Philanthropy Day projects, the Connected Corridor, and many other things. And fourth up is Frank Newell. Frank is also a founder, and he's the current vice chair of the Community Foundation. And under his leadership, our Community Impact Fund has doubled, which increases the number of grants that we can distribute to support critical and timely Long Beach programs. And additionally, Frank was the attorney for the foundation from its incorporation until his retirement in 2015. So as you can see, we have some very distinguished and knowledgeable guests with us today. And thank you, all four of you, for participating.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So I think, Gary, I think we want to start with Jim Worsham. Yeah, because he started first, and I think he has a really interesting story to share, that initial idea that was sparked.
I do as well.
Community Foundation.
Tell us about that, Jim. How did you get started? What was the idea? What made you think of it? Why here?
Okay, well, this actually the story starts in 1995. I was the president of the Estate Planning and Trust Council here in Long Beach, which was a group of attorneys, CPAs, financial planners, insurance professionals, a great group of professional people. And we would meet once a month with a special guest speaker. And in February of 1995, our special guest speaker was Jack Shakely, who was president of the California Community Foundation. And he told the story about the California Community Foundation, which is somewhat of a misnomer because they're basically a Los Angeles County Community Foundation. But at the end of his talk, I thought, that sounds wonderful. We ought to have something like that in Long Beach. And I asked him at the end of his talk, do we have something like that in Long Beach? And he says, no, we're your community foundation. And I thought, for a guy as connected in the city as I was, to have never heard of them before didn't bode well for how well they were connecting with Long Beach. So as it turns out, that summer I was elected president of the Estate Planning and Trust Council for the following year. And I challenged our board to look into starting a community foundation, which was kind of a challenge in and of itself because a lot of the board members hadn't even attended the meeting to know what Jack Shakely's great story was. However, I twisted enough arms and we put together a committee that hosted a meeting for some prominent people in the community to really seriously explore the idea. And heading up that meeting was a fellow named Ed Beckwith, who just happened to be in California at the time, and he was the general counsel for the national organization, the Council on Foundations. And he told us how Sure, we could start a community foundation, but we probably need at least $3 million to do that. And suddenly the room went kind of quiet. I think there were people in the room that could have fronted that kind of money, but nobody was willing to write a check for just an idea. So we didn't give up though, and we selected a committee of people to go that next step. And we hosted a big community-wide outreach at Houses Forum at the Memorial Medical Center. And we did a little survey, and we even had Jack Shakely come down and tell us what a community foundation was. And the response was very, very encouraging. And so from there, we moved forward. One of my big helpers through all of this was Dan Ritter, who was the publisher of the Press Telegram, because he had been a board member of the California Community Foundation. And another board member was Nini Horn, and she was anxious to see Long Beach have something like this. And then I had another member of the Estate Planning and Trust Council, Kevin McGuan, who was constantly pushing me, Jim, you can do this, you can do this. So to make a long story short, we partnered with the California Community Foundation, and we actually started as their Long Beach affiliate, which was a great idea that was thrown out by Jim Ackerman, who was one of the most sympathetic encouragers at the time. And he was even willing to put a little money into it. And so we had a great committee to get started. And through Dan Ritter, we were also able to partner with the Knight Foundation. Dan was, because he was from the Knight Ritter newspaper chain, had a lot of connections with the Knight Foundation, and they were able to put some money in to get us started. So that's kind of the raw beginnings. And as I look back now, I can tell you quite honestly, I have recommended to a lot of people that they don't start a nonprofit unless they're willing to put years.
We've all been there sharing our lessons with others. Now, Jim, maybe you can also share about, I think you were connected with Jean Bixby Smith as well, right? And she played a very influential role in those very early days of getting things going. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. And Jean, if you could kind of chime in from your perspective. I know personally, Jean, you were the one that put the arm on me to participate, but go ahead. Later. Okay, but Jim,
well,
how did you guys work together?
I knew a lot of people from Rotary, and I just knew Jean in passing, but she was one of the most enthusiastic people at our very first meeting. And as it turns out, we all got together and we decided that Jean had to be our chair. Dan Ritter was actually our
Jean must have missed that meeting, I assume.
No, she was there, and everybody told me she is the hardest worker in Long Beach. So
that's still true.
And I took it to heart, and she was indefatigable. I'm telling you, she was the hardest worker in Long Beach, and so we went out and twisted a lot of arms, and that's kind of how we got started there.
And Jean, what made you say yes? I mean, obviously you had your hands in lots of different things. You were fully active, engaged. How did you decide that, yeah, I'll do one more thing for Long Beach? What was your reasoning to say yes?
Well, I'd been brought into the conversation early on. I was familiar with the California Community Foundation, and I did concurrently serve on that board along with the first roughly 10 years of the Community Foundation. I was on the CCF board as well. It was interesting because at one point I went to a conference after I'd been on a few years. And so I'm looking at all of the information presented from the standpoint of one of the largest foundations in the conference and the very smallest, because we were the newest. So it was a interesting picture of what it can become. But I also knew that we didn't have credibility in Long Beach. As Jim said, people didn't know what CCF was. They didn't understand about community foundations at all. And we felt like as usual in LA, kind of the little stepsister, and didn't feel that Long Beach and Long Beach residents got the recognition for the size community and their needs met.
So it was your passion for Long Beach then that really drove
Passion for Long
you
Beach,
that
yes.
we can do this, we can make this happen. We don't need to be the stepsister. This is something we can do. And you were willing, I guess, to take the leadership role at that time to chair the organization and make it happen between you and Jim.
Also, it was a Night Ritter newspaper at that point, and the Ritters moved out of town soon after that, when Ritters sold their share of, or continued their share of the newspaper business as an affiliate of Knight's, and Knight really took over the organization of things. So it was Dan who actually asked me if I would do that, truthfully. So at any rate, we started it, and in the early years, we made grants of about, for maybe the first 6 years, about 25 to 30,000 to 5 or 6 different agencies. Each year we had a focus that we looked on, for example, children and youth one year, or homebound seniors another year. And we would have 10 or 15 applications, and we would narrow it down to where we could give 5 to 6 grants for a total of $30,000 roughly each year. Those funds came from CCF and some donations from board members, for example, Jim Ackerman. And so one of the common themes, though, that ran through our area of focus when it was children and youth was violence prevention. And that comes into play later, so I'll get back to it. By 2004, after 6 years or so, we became concerned that these grants were too small to be impactful. And they were given to existing agencies for existing programs for the most part. And we wanted to think about creating more impact in the community. So at that point, we reduced our giving with utilizing more support from Knight Foundation in 2004 to just 2 grants of $25,000 each.
So is it fair to say that the early objectives were really to get very Long Beach focused, really determine what were the needs of the Long Beach community in those days, and then making sure that that's where you and Jim and others, that's where your efforts were targeted?
We were Greater Long Beach Foundation then, because the Press Telegram and the Knight Foundation backed us up. They serve the Greater Long Beach community, i.e. all the little ones around. But absolutely, our focus was on Long Beach and Long Beach specific programs.
And I know we're going to transition here in a moment, but I would think between you and Jim, your next thing was, how do you make it sustainable, right? How do you cover your operating costs? And I know you were influential in the Founders Fund, you and Jim, and the Vision Fund, but just making sure there were reserves, because it costs money to operate a foundation. Maybe you guys could touch upon that just a little bit before we transition.
Well, you know, that was the biggest challenge that we had, or any new community foundation has, is how do you keep paying for yourself? Because we charge a modest fee on every fund that we manage. And you have to get to a certain size to where that's really going to keep the organization going. And so those first years were really tough until we decided that we had to go out in the community and really raise some money to make sure our costs were covered while we grew. And so we set a goal of raising $1 million from the various founders. And I see the list of founders there on the screen right now. Each one of those founders put in at least $25,000 to get us up to our $1 million. And we actually raised a little more than $1 million, but that was our backroom supply of cash should we need it. And in the early years, we did need some of it. So
when I saw that list, Jim, I think I saw even got Governor Duke Majan, and and
Yeah.
Gloria to participate as founders.
I
Some really
did. Well,
great
you know,
people.
George is a great guy. And when I went to talk to him about the community foundation, he asked me a tax question. He said, well, do you file that report every year with the Secretary of State? And I said, oh yeah, we do. And he's, well, okay, I'll go home and talk to Gloria about it, but I think we'll do it. And by golly, they did. So
That's a great story.
It is a
Yeah.
great story, and I'm so glad that you talk about those early days, Jim, and the passion that was behind it, and you and Jean, and thank you for all that hard work. Because when Jane and I took over in 2014, we had such a really well-run organization with a good, solid backbone and financial status, and I really want to take a moment to talk about some of the impact that the Community Foundation made, and early on. And Jean, we've talked a lot about the Community Impact Fund as it relates to being flexible to community needs. And you touched on it a little bit, but there was one project in particular that started with a shooting at Cabrillo High School in 2005 that really activated the Community Foundation to make change for the better. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. As I said, we were concerned that our little grants weren't making any real difference in the community. They were certainly welcomed by those small agencies who provided good service, but so we had already begun to turn our focus towards larger and more impactful grants. And then there was the shooting. The student was killed, and and it was in April. And there was great concern in the Long Beach community that would mean that when the summertime came, the kids are out of school, wandering around, that there would be the opportunity for escalating violence or tension. There were basically four ethnic groups on the west side, and there were constant stresses and strains between those four groups. So we went looking and thinking about how we could impact that situation. And we, another thing important to notice, that there were no services offered on the west side for the young people who lived there. They were all offered on the downtown side of the river, but there wasn't ready transportation, it wasn't easy. And so the west side community with no nonprofits housed there was really not getting any attention at any level to speak of. So we decided it was time to change from reactive programming or funding of programs to proactive. And we started what came to be known as the Connected Corridor Project. And that was one of the two programs, but the other one, we went out to the community and asked for proposals for new programs housed on the west side to reach the youth of the west side.
And Jean, where would the funding for those programs come from?
At that point, we had developed a closer relationship with Knight, and we were really getting, this is one of their community initiatives, was to reach out and help fund change-making programs within those other communities. So we had access to their funds. We reached out to create new programs. The first one I'll tell you about was based at Cabrillo High School. And it was, there's a program now run by the CCEJ that is similar to that, and they call it the Building Bridges Project. Basically, they went in, now this is the group who put it together. The plan was they went in and they picked 4 students from each grade level having a representative from one of the 4 ethnic groups that dominate on the west side. So they did that for each grade level. They brought them together, did a Building Bridges kind of training program about how to dispel rumors that get about in the community that are, incorrect.
And what kind of results did you see? I mean, did the kids, were they very interested? Did you have to drag them kicking and screaming? Did you see some behavior?
I wasn't there and I didn't do it, but they did have summertime training or early summer training. And then they dispersed these kids out into the community to try and help mediate disputes, to ease tensions, to create friendly gatherings, that kind of thing. So ultimately, that was one program. And the other one, we went to the YMCA of Long Beach, there was a classroom at Stevens Junior High School, middle school, I guess, that was full of computers. It had been there for 2 years, brand new computers. None of the faculty knew how to use the computers well enough to train the 8th graders. And so the YMCA came in and they did this kind of thing. They taught computer stuff, handling to 8th graders that were on the east side of the river primarily. They went in, took over this classroom, trained both the teachers and the 8th graders in that class, some 20 plus of them, and to prepare them to go into high school where, of course, they'd be expected to be able to use, to be computer literate.
And that program, Jean, is around still today. The Community Foundation with Gary and with Jane too had funded a 3rd youth institute over at the Villages at Cabrillo. And so it's kind of a homecoming for us to be able to plant another flag and help support our youth in Long Beach. And we have a couple minutes left on your portion of the segment. And so I would like you to talk about the Send a Kid to Camp program, because that has been around for over 20 years. And it started out as a really impassioned idea, and would love to hear about your idea when it started, because it's still around today and it raises about $70,000-$80,000 a year for deserving youth to go to camp.
Okay, in that case, it was someone coming to us. The 5 agencies in Long Beach that had camps, week-long camps in the mountains. So they were faraway camps, not day camps in Long Beach. They had trouble funding the need, obviously. And the Los Angeles Times ran a Send a Kid to Camp fund every year. They raised something like $500,000, but of the $500,000, only 15,000 came to Long Beach for all 5 of those youth serving agencies. So they got 3,000 each. So they approached me knowing that I was chairman of the Community Foundation at the time, and asked if the Community Foundation would be willing to go with them and talk to the newspapers, plural, in Long Beach, and see if they would together be willing to do a drive in Long Beach that would raise funds for sending kids to camp. So of course we started with a press telegram, and we went in to see Rich Archbold and Tom Hennessy. And at the end of our conversation, they said, absolutely yes, but we want that program all for ourselves. So we launched that program. There are Tom's kids, that they came to be named that. Tom Hennessy, it never would have happened without him and his enthusiasm and his having adopted it so wholeheartedly. Now, of course, Rich Archbold follows up and does that. So the first year,
it's great. You know, one of the things that I really enjoy hearing about is these stories that have longevity to them, right? Whether it's helping out that middle school or the Send a Kid to Camp, you know, not only was it a good idea 15 or 20 years ago, but it's bigger and better than ever. And I think, you know, as Jim pointed out in his comments, it wasn't just the starting of the Community Foundation, but it's the fact that we're a stronger, more engaged organization today than we were just a number of years ago. And 25 years from now, the foundation is going to be doing some even more amazing things. And I think now, as part of this, maybe we could transition to Jane. I know that Jane was very engaged in the Connected Corridor effort that had some nice funding behind as well. But Jane, you can tell us about it, but as I recall, it was really looking at the entire city, identifying some areas of the city that maybe weren't getting as many services as others. How do you connect everything together, not be so downtown centric, but you know far better than I. I mean, tell us about Connected Corridor, your involvement in it, and really what it was all about.
Okay, thank you. Well, we knew Knight Foundation had put out the word that they were looking for RFP from cities to see how they can implement change within the city. The Atlanta Corridor project was one that they felt was worthy of granting a sizable amount of money to, and we were ready to do it. Atlantic Avenue comes, all through so many different neighborhoods that we thought it was a great way to engage people. I will say that everybody said everything happens downtown, nothing happens, in North Long Beach or uptown. So we made certain that we started the Atlantic Avenue project uptown. We started at the top of the city and worked our way down. And what we did is we brought groups together in various neighborhoods to tell them what we want to do. The goal was to break down what I call the invisible lines of demarcation. We have so much diversity coming down the corridor. We wanted them to talk to each other. We wanted them to work together. We wanted them to help each other. And so we were able to take the Atlantic Avenue and about 1,500 feet on each side of it to grab the neighborhood people. So they understood what we wanted to do and would participate in it. And they got to talking to each other. The different neighborhoods, all of a sudden you had the Hispanic and the Cambodian, and we just wanted to break those lines down so that they actually were, a neighborhood all the way down. Hence the connected corridor, because that's exactly what we did. We connected those neighborhoods all the way down, and we did start at the top, and we did reach downtown, and there were a lot of programs that came out of that. But we really felt that it was important for the residents and the business people to participate in these various neighborhood gatherings. So they understood the purpose of it, and they were really excited, and they participated a lot in our meetings that we had in the various neighborhoods. But it just breaks down the barriers, and that's what it was all about. It was about getting people to talk to each other and working together. It doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, it doesn't matter. Just, you're all residents and people within our community. And we wanted those people to talk to each other. So that really was, the main thing. The biggest part of that was there was an art component, set aside funds. A substantial amount of money was set aside for an art component to this whole thing. And one of the things, people say, well, let's put a statue in the median, or let's put a big sign up that said, this is what we did. We were totally opposed to that. And so one of the big things we wanted to do with this money was to, number one, we wanted it to be in the north part of Long Beach, and we wanted it to be interactive. Nothing's worse than driving down the street and saying, oh, look at that statue over there, big deal. We wanted to be interactive. We wanted the community to be able to utilize it, but it had to be an art component. And so we have a sound garden, which is a play yard. And it is an art project. It took, oh my gosh, Marcelle helped me, 3 years to get all the pieces put together and all the approvals.
It took 2 years too long, Jane. That's how long it took. I was involved in that in the beginning as well.
Yeah, no kidding. But that's a Houghton Park. It sorely needed something for people to come, for parents to come and bring their children and feel comfortable and safe and be able to watch them play and have a good time. The Sound Garden, thanks to the city, the Conservation Corps took part of that. They actually helped put that together. And I think the project is definitely an art project. It definitely is interactive. It met all the components of what we wanted to do.
I think Jane deserves a lot of kudos for that project, because from the very beginning, she said, I want something that people actually have to get out of their car to go see, and they can do something. And I just happened to take my grandson up there a couple of weeks ago. It's still there. It's still active. It's beautiful. And so I think Jane, deserves a lot of credit for that one.
Well, not only that, Jim, but as you probably know, that even when Jane left the board and wasn't the chair, she still stayed involved with that project. She still made sure that it got finished. So, she didn't leave and say, I'm done. She hung in there and made sure that it got done. And Jane, along those lines, what are some other things that you can think of while you were on the board, particularly as you were board chair, some significant accomplishments? I mean, I can think of one right away, is I believe it was towards the end of your tenure that the Long Beach Community Foundation became financially sustainable, so that we didn't have to worry about going out and fundraising to try and meet costs, but we actually had enough in the fund to pay operating expenses when rainy day came. So that's at least one I can think of. I know it was a long way to get there, but what are some other things?
The other thing for me, and yes, sustainability was of utmost importance, so we could sleep at night, quite frankly.
Right.
But the other thing that I felt strongly about was going into the National Philanthropy Day, and everybody celebrates National Philanthropy Day. They might have a luncheon, they may get together and give themselves kudos. We decided that we are very philanthropic and we give grants out. Why don't we do something physically and financially to show our support of National Philanthropy Day? And we did that. We the board jumped in and we raised money at the board level. We got volunteers, and you can see there's a mural that was done. The first one was actually done in 2014. We painted an entryway mural and refurbished the window frames and the signage. It was an amazing thing for us to do. It was oh my goodness,
I believe you're looking for Young Horizons. Jane and I were
Young Horizons, my goodness, sorry about
we were talking about it last night. Can't believe it was all the way back in 2014. That was the first year you became chair, and just out of the gates, you said, we need to be part of this community. We need to be out in the community and do something impactful. And it was a challenge, but
we had a lot of paint on us, a lot on the wall, but a lot on us. Then the next year, we continued that. That was successful. We made a difference. In 2015, we worked with the Boys and Girls Club. I think it was the Weingart Boys and Girls Club, and they were doing some renovation. So they leveled behind their building for us. They had people come in, they leveled it and cleared it out. And we actually built a garden for them and built the individual boxes for them. The idea was they could grow vegetables and the young people could tend that and actually take some of those home, because we know that so many of those people, those young folks don't get good meals at home. And so the idea was they would get little bags and take some of it home. That was a great project. The other was 2016, we went to Precious Lambs Daycare. It was daycare for homeless children. And we went in there and put full foliage around their entire playground so that they had privacy. We did a sandbox. We painted all their equipment and all their benches. And we created what I called a soothing consultation room, because the parents did have to come in and talk about problems. And we took an old storeroom, cleaned it out, painted it, put some really neat little furniture in there, and it was a quiet room that the parents could go to. And then in 17, we worked with the rescue mission and we did a healing garden at Lydia House, which is provides housing for women and children.
And Jane, one of the best parts about that project was the jackhammer. Bob Stemmerl and I really had a good time using that, breaking up the concrete.
And that was scary.
I think we can queue up a photo on that. I think actually we have.
Oh, let's hope not.
Yeah. Oh no, I think we should. Yeah.
But those are just some of the things that we physically got out and did what we said everybody else should do. And what's better way to do something or to tell people to do something is to do it yourself and show them.
Right.
So I was really excited. The board just jumped in on all those, and there are more projects after the 17, but I want to stop there. The pictures that we have of people actually planting is great.
But as you stop, let me just say, I think that jumping in and just getting it done really epitomizes you as an individual as well, Jane. I've known you for many years, and you've never been hesitate to jump in and get it done when something needs doing. So we've always valued and appreciated that about you.
Thank you. I want to real quick, one last project that I think was amazing was the Around the Table project. And that happened that was in 2017. And it came out of Chicago had an On the Table project. Knight Foundation wanted that to be replicated in other cities. They picked 10 cities nationwide to do that, and we were one of the 10. And along with the funding from Knight, we had funding in it, and we partnered with We Love Long Beach, who did a lot of the grunt work for us. And the picture we're seeing is the first gathering. We got 5,000 people in Long Beach on the same day to talk.
That's amazing.
About.
That's amazing.
And then there was a follow-up in 2018, but to get 5,000 people in our city on the same day, people housed dinners in their homes. They had coffees and breakfasts. And like I say, what we're seeing is the libraries opened up their rooms to make this happen. 5,000 people in one day. That was a huge undertaking and so successful, and really, really proud of that one.
Yeah, and that was an interesting year because it was a transition between Gary and Jane, and it was something very different for the foundation to be doing something like that. And it was a big, bold move. And I have to emphasize that the Community Foundation, not only are we grant makers, but we're also conveners, and we have the distinct ability to reach out in the community, engage other nonprofits like We Love Long Beach, like City Fabric for the Sound Garden and others, to make positive change for the community. And something that was special about the about the Around the Table, Jane, was the fact that people opened their homes. I know that I table hopped and home hopped like you did throughout the day, but we had Cal State Long Beach. At the Japanese Garden, we had the Aquarium of the Pacific. We had people in Bixby Knolls, people in downtown, people in East Long Beach, and really gathering for one day. So that's something that I think is very unique to our city, and a testament to our
and the police department and the fire department and city folks came out to show that their involvement in it as well. That really made a difference for, I believe, people in the community.
Everybody was all in.
Yep.
Very good. Yeah. So thanks, Jane, for that. And I want to pause here for a moment and pick on the folks in the audience. I know you're there. Would love to hear from you. Come into the chat, say hello, say who you are, how you're associated with the foundation, and start putting your questions in there. I've got them up on the screen off to the side. And would love to hear. This is such a great opportunity to talk to our founders all together, even though we're on Zoom. We're gathering to celebrate our 25th, and we really want to hear from you. And so please engage with us and go for it. Even if it's just a memory or just a question you've always wanted to know about our efforts. And we're going to go to our final segment with Frank Newell, who is currently our vice chair. And Frank, you've been here since the very, very beginning and involved in a lot of milestones with the Community Foundation. And I'm wondering if you could kind of bring it home for our viewers by summarizing why the Community Foundation is an asset in our city. I mean, could we imagine what it's like without the Community Foundation, and what efforts as a founder are you particularly most proud of?
Well, I feel like I've been reliving the last 25 years sitting here silently, which is hard for me to do. Like Gary, I was strong-armed by Gene Smith as a founder and became involved when it was the Greater Long Beach Foundation, an affiliate of the California Community Foundation. At that point, the Long Beach Community Foundation, as a separate autonomous organization, was a vision. And I think in a broad sense, what I'm proud of is that in a relatively short period of time, since the Community Foundation was incorporated in 2006, I feel like we fulfilled the vision by being an organization that fosters and promotes philanthropy. We've heard about partnering with various organizations in focusing really on the needs of the Long Beach community. A couple of things we haven't talked about today is the fact that the Long Beach Community Foundation assists individuals with their charitable gifting. And we now have 75 donor advisor funds where those people rely upon us to assist them with their charitable goals. We also have partnerships with over 60 nonprofits in the Long Beach community. And a lot of smaller nonprofits entrust the Community Foundation to manage and invest their funds because they don't have the resources to do. And we also hold large endowments so that those organizations can promote themselves and benefit their particular goals. We've talked a lot about the collaboration, and I think that the Long Beach Community Foundation has become the go-to organization, as you can see with Knight Ridder, as you can see with Send a Kid to Camp. And more recently, you can see with the Coronavirus Fund. You may recall last year with the start of the pandemic, Long Beach created a Coronavirus Fund and asked the Community Foundation to be the vehicle for collecting the money, holding the money, and dispersing it. In a very short period of time, we were able to raise over $1.3 million and give out $1.25 million to 90 nonprofits, providing such things as food, shelter, home care, remote learning in the very early parts of the pandemic. So I think when I look at the big picture, we've accomplished a lot in the last 25 years. I had the opportunity to witness as an attorney the early years and joined the board in 2016. And I think what makes me particularly confident going forward is the fact that we have been able to become, number one, financially sustainable, and number two, we're in the process of making major steps to grow our Community Impact Fund. And what the Community Impact Fund is, every year our board decides one or more community needs that we think are important, and we fund those. We started with around the table, housing and homelessness. And as we go forward, I think in the next 25 years, we will have more impact because of the fact that our Corona Impact Fund and our monies will grow.
That's great,
Well,
Frank. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something about Frank. From the very beginning, we relied on Frank for legal services. And one of the things that I am most proud of regarding the Long Beach Community Foundation is the integrity has always been there. Our reputation and our integrity in the city is our biggest asset. And Frank was instrumental in helping us assure that we had that. So every year we're audited, we're accredited by the Council on Foundations. We've got all of the brownie points you could want for being trustworthy. And Frank is one of the ones that really helped us maintain that trust.
Well, I'd like to actually pose that question to the entire panel, because I think that the Community Foundation's reputation for being the trusted source to protect donor intent and integrity is important. But Jean and Jane and Frank, what are you most proud of the last 25 years that either you were involved with or that was accomplished by the foundation?
Well, for me, it was the fact that we've done what we said we'd do.
Yeah.
We worked hard to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, and we built this is a biggie. You built a reputation in the community. We are well respected, and we are known. People know who we are, and so I think we accomplished what the original board set out to do. Jean and Jim gave us shoulders to stand on, if you will, a good footing, and the board has been very engaged in all the things we do. So I'm just proud of the fact that we've done what we said we would do. We show that we will support what we say.
Jean, how about you?
So many things to choose from, but I guess initially what I would say is that when we started it as the Greater Long Beach Community Foundation, we didn't have any money, we didn't have anything, and we relied on the generosity, truthfully, of the California Community Foundation. And then, as I said, one day we decided we needed to grow up and go on our own. It took us about 2 years to get that pulled together, but we did it finally and dropped the word greater, became just Long Beach Community Foundation. And at that point, our goal was, they were roughly $10,000, not all of which did our fund holders agree would be transferred to us for a little while. They had become comfortable with CCF, who invested their funds. And so some of them were a little reluctant to come over. So we basically that first year had $6,000 and a goal to be at 25 million. I mean, $6 million, I'm sorry. But a goal to be at 25 million and be self-sustainable. And Jim and the board and I worked on that kind of relentlessly over the years with the support of those initial people who invested in us, took us at our word and honored our commitment, and that we would honor that commitment to grow it to where it was a self-sustainable organization, so that we feel comfortable turning it over to all of you. And although, as I recall, the $25,000 goal we didn't reach until about 3 or 4 months after both of us were gone, but nevertheless, within that year before Marcelle and
Actually, Jim, you remember it was
took over.
like a few weeks before you did your official retirement. So it was your party.
Right. My goal was to get us to 25 million. I
25
always
million.
thought 25 million was the magic number. And it happened just as I retired. I can't be more proud. So,
I know it's good
Well,
timing.
Jamie will be happy to know that we're now at $60 million.
right.
Yes,
And I'm especially proud of the relationships that have been built along the way. And whether it's with the nonprofit community, the Knight Ridder, the city of Long Beach, I think that the foundation is becoming more and more recognizable. And we've laid the foundation to become bigger and better as we go forward.
I think that's exactly right. I'm glad you started the dialogue, Jim, about the reputation and the integrity, because we couldn't have grown, as Frank's just mentioned, we couldn't have had that growth if those things weren't in place, from the very beginning. And I know one of the stories that Marcelle likes to tell is, one of her first, and being CEO, talking to the public and saying, well, raise your hand. How many people in the audience, have heard of the Long Beach Community Foundation? And, there's kind of some crickets, maybe it's 1 out of 10 invest. And a few more years go by and she asks the same question and 50% of the hands of the audience go up. And again, if you don't have a positive reputation, the integrity, the character of the organization, those good things wouldn't happen. And I think that's certainly a testament for those of you that were at the very beginning. But more importantly, you've created a set of values that have endured through our organization, so that the current board is as reflective of those values as the day that you came up with them. And for that, we really owe all 4 of you a great debt of thanks.
And for the audience out there, we're not a fundraising organization. So Jean and Jim and Jane and Frank, they weren't out there necessarily fundraising. They had to convince people to follow us and go where we were going. And that's a harder lift in a sense, to ask to give to an organization that we don't do programming. We're more fund managers. Like Frank said, we manage 60 million today, 178 different funds, that from scholarships to donor advised funds to state gifts. And it's really the strength of the team we have in Long Beach, but also the strength that we have of a $4 billion entity in Greater Kansas City. And that was a big decision that Jean and Jim made.
And the right decision, clearly.
Yeah. It was. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you traveled and the distinction, because they're not in Long Beach and we like to do everything by Long Beach, for Long Beach, with Long Beach, but this was a strategic decision.
Right. Well, as it turns out, we got to a point where in order for us to take that next big step, we had to do something to separate from the California Community Foundation or renegotiate our relationship with them. And they weren't too open to renegotiating, and they suggested, well, maybe you could go partner with the San Diego Community Foundation, or they said the Kansas City Community Foundation. Well, it turns out that San Diego, it didn't look like that was going to work. And how would that look? We said the Long Beach Community Foundation uses San Diego as their back office. So my wife and I went back to Kansas City, and the Kansas City Community Foundation had established an affiliate foundation called Greater Horizons. The sole purpose of that was to manage assets for smaller community foundations like Long Beach. And we made a really good deal with them, and we've just really been happy with it. They provide tremendous back office support for us: accounting, investment management, advisory services, everything we could want. So it frees us up to do the job here in Long Beach.
Well, and frankly, they do it very economically as well.
Yeah.
And
oh, yes.
talent tool. I mean, we are very thrilled with that relationship. I'm sure it had to be somewhat of a leap of faith on your part, that as much research and analysis you do, you never know how well a relationship is really going to work. But I can tell you, I think it's probably met or exceeded every criteria that you laid out when you made that initial decision.
Well, and it's great for staff locally, because then we're able to focus on Long
Right.
Beach and the issues on Long Beach, and have all of our accounting handled by a much larger institution, and really lean on them, not only for that, but for the endowments that we manage. And there is a question and a clarification in the chat about endowments that I want to touch on. So a lot of people think, well, I'll leave a big gift in my estate plan to a nonprofit and they can spend it on programming, and that's how it's done sometimes. But the issue with that is, once it's left there, it's spent and it's gone forever. But an endowment works to remain forever and ever, to fund that institution in perpetuity or forever, just through the income of the fund. And that's something that was really an important part of Jim's mantra as a former CPA and managing finances appropriately. And that's a big distinction. Rather than giving all the money out right now, let it trickle out slowly over time to support a program forever. And that nonprofit then has that steady income stream. I want to kind of close out here as we're getting towards the end with a little bit of comment about really why we exist, and that's to support the most critical issues in Long Beach. So 2 things. I'd like to invite the audience to go in the chat and in 1 or 2 or 3 words, give your number 1 and number 2 issues in Long Beach that you really feel need attention. We'd love to hear from you, because we did that as a community-wide around the table that Jane talked about. And there's another question in the chat about, are we going to do one of those again? And I have to tell you, that's a conversation that Gary and I and the staff have to have, because even though We Love Long Beach was wonderful to work with, it is a monumental task to do that. But one of the most impactful things I think that I've personally ever done, and thoroughly enjoyed seeing the community engage that way. It's certainly something that we'd like to take a look at, especially as we move into our next phase of our strategic plan, to really understand and take the temperature of the city and find out what all those critical needs are. But I want to pose that to the panel, thinking about if you could choose a top number 1 issue facing our city, and coronavirus is kind of at the forefront of that. But if you could put that aside, and maybe it's repercussions from that, or maybe it's related to it, because in the past we've funded homelessness, housing, youth programs, literacy, education, all sorts of great programs, art programs, and with our community endowment fund. But I'd love to hear from the audience, and I see homelessness in there and student support. To the panelists, what would you say? Maybe we start with Jean.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things to consider. Certainly, coming out of the pandemic, homelessness and all the housing issues, are people who are being evicted from their homes, or will be when the lid is lifted, and getting them resettled and getting, I was encouraged by the mayor's talk yesterday, which I listened to, with 8,000 housing units, I believe, under construction in Long Beach. I was surprised and amazed that there's that much progress, but that's a big hurdle to go over. I do think that we have to, as do all communities, have to get over the hump of how well do we treat our marginalized communities. It's not enough to go out there and just provide support services. We really, as a community, need to listen better, I think, to the homeless, to the different ethnic groups, and help to heal, as all communities perhaps need some healing. And maybe there's a way in which the Community Foundation can forward that.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, Jane, what would you say to that?
Well, I think that, obviously we've been hearing about homelessness for more than a year or 2. And for me, it's not just homelessness, but we have students that are homeless. We have, the young people that are homeless, but it's the health element, or the lack thereof of good health, that I think is really important. They need to be healthy as well, because I don't care whether you try to help them get into some other living environment, they need to get healthy. And we need to focus on their health as well.
Agreed. Frank?
Well, anyone who knows me knows I'm an advocate of early education and literacy. And I think this last year has created a potential crisis for younger kids, especially in underserved areas, of missing a key period in their life. And I think that one of the focuses going forward is to focus on education and try to make up the gap that's been widened in the last year.
I think that's a great observation. We don't even understand how dramatic this impact of the lost last year is going to be on students, but we know it's going to be sizable, and hopefully, right, the Community Foundation is going to be in an important place where we can help. Jim, what do you think?
Well, kind of related to all the things we've talked about, if I could wave my magic wand, I would create job opportunities here in Long Beach. And because, we have this fantastic university here in Long Beach, biggest one in the system. And yet when graduates are finished with their schooling, too often their job opportunities are on other communities. And we need to find a way to keep them engaged here in Long Beach. And that will do a lot to solve some of these other problems too. So that would be where I would want to put my focus.
I think as we start to wrap up here, I guess a couple of comments, I'd like to share before we do is, first of all, it's a big thank you to the 4 of you. I think you've done an amazing effort in creating the bones of an organization that not only is the Community Foundation doing great things today, but I think we can clearly see that 5, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be doing more amazing things, particularly as the Community Impact Fund continues to grow. But things look good. You know, clear skies ahead. We're going to continue to riding on your shoulders. And Marcelle, what comments would you wind up with?
Well, I'd close by just thanking our founders and for the efforts they made. They were huge at the time, and it was unconventional and foreign and unique. And you really had to sell the idea of this entity, and you did. And I'm grateful. The entire community, that community is grateful to you. And I heard Long Beach City College and Cal State Long Beach. So this celebration of our 25th anniversary is really looking at the past, which is today, to really bring you all up to speed on how we formed. And then we're going to turn it towards the present with Rich Archibald, Cheryl Perry, and Julie Bortoletto, all from the Historical Society and the Long Beach Heritage, to really look at our community to see what it looks like when philanthropy interacts with our community, and what would it look like if philanthropy wasn't here. As you're driving and walking through the city, what would you see? And with Cal State Long Beach and City College, we're going to talk to some youth leaders in our community. We're going to see what's the future of philanthropy, because as you're looking around, you know, this Zoom call, these people are very involved, but what's the next generation going to do? How are they going to be involved? How are they going to give their time, talents, and treasures? So with that, we hope you join us on June 25th, as well as August 25th to wrap up our final webinar. Call us, join our Facebook pages, our social media, and email us. We would love to hear from you, hear your ideas, visit our website. And I think that's a wrap for us today,
Okay.
Gary.
Well, thank you all. Nice job, Marcelle.
Good job, Gary. See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.